Throughout history, millions of people have been misdiagnosed and mistreated by physicians. Not necessarily because of wrongdoing, but because doctors simply didn't know any better. Epileptics were beaten. The mentally ill were considered incurable, hence not a medical responsibility. Many languished in prisons and cages. Infusions of lamb's blood were once state-of-the-art in medicine. Surgeons were offended when Joseph Lister asked them to wash their hands and disinfect the operating area. Even Louis Pasteur, father of the science of microbiology, was the center of controversy when he announced that disease is caused by tiny organisms invisible to the human eye. These examples remind us that medicine is an evolving science. New discoveries challenge existing beliefs. But in the meantime, for people suffering from a new or misunderstood disease, life can be a living hell.
I just cannot get rid of this flu, and it keeps getting worse, not better.
But it's been months now. Maybe it's not the flu. Flu doesn't last that long.
You ought to go back to Dr. Raymond.
I did, Blanche. He said I'm fine.
Get a second opinion. She did. She went to Dr. Schlesinger. Well, then, you are fine. Now, you want to hear my idea?
She is not fine, Blanche. Look at her.
I didn't say she looks fine. I said she was fine. She looks like hell.
That scene was from the 1989 season premiere of The Golden Girls. The mysterious disease that struck Dorothy is chronic fatigue immune dysfunction syndrome, CFIDS or SIFIDS, a disease that today disables thousands, perhaps millions of Americans. You may never have heard of it, or you may not have taken it seriously. After all, many doctors don't believe it exists. So first, let's get this straight. SIFIDS is a real disease. It's a serious disease. It has been recognized as such by the United States Department of Health and Human Services since 1988.
I think all of us agree, one, that there is a problem. There's an illness called chronic fatigue syndrome. And while that sounds obvious, you know, for a long time, the syndrome has been highly controversial among medical circles as to whether it exists or it does not exist.
SIFIDS may be the most widespread, fastest-moving chronic disease to have emerged in the world in this century. No one can predict when, how, or who SIFIDS will strike next. In 1984, SIFIDS struck the resort community of Incline Village, Nevada. Almost 300 people in the Lake Tahoe area came down with a mysterious malady which the media would dub the yuppie flu.
I remember seeing a patient who had been a former marathon runner and had come back from China and said she'd developed some illness in China and absolutely could do nothing after she'd come back. And I thought this was kind of a trivial viral illness, but she never got better. At about the same time, a whole bunch of patients from the community, from the girls, the basketball team, and some teachers from the Truckee High School developed very similar complaints.
The patients complained of fever, weakness, headaches, swollen glands, difficulty concentrating, and most of all, fatigue which no amount of bed rest could cure. At first, patients thought they had the flu, but it never went away.
They kept accelerating to the point that I guess by the midsummer, July or so of 1985, we had almost 200 cases.
I initially called the CDC because this is what they're supposed to solve, these unusual kinds of diseases, and asked for some help.
In September 1985, CDC epidemiologists finally arrived in Incline Village. The focus of their investigation was to determine if Epstein-Barr virus could be the cause of the strange epidemic.
As we were seeing some of these patients, we brought them into the room to show them, here, feel the spleen, or here, feel this node, or this is a patient. They didn't really, in my view, like seeing a lot of these people. They preferred to stay down in an office poring over charts. And there was a high degree of skepticism on both of their parts. And then after 2 weeks of collecting chart data and serologies, they went back to the CDC, and months went by and we never heard anything from it.
When word spread to the media, Cheney and Peterson found themselves the target of angry business leaders who feared news of the epidemic would hurt tourism.
I ran into doctors that said that very thing, that I was bad for tourism, that didn't I know that the only way Tahoe City was ever going to survive was with tourists, and that I shouldn't tell anybody.
Shunned and harassed, the doctors fought a lonely battle. Peterson's car was sprayed with graffiti. Restaurants refused to serve them. And a group of mothers asked that Peterson's child be removed from nursery school. While doctors Cheney and Peterson persevered without help in Nevada, a similar mystery disease struck in the small rural town of Lyndonville, New York. Here, it was mostly children who became ill with the non-stop flu.
The group in Lyndonville comprises 230 people who developed this pattern of symptoms. About half of them had it to the severity where you could say that they met the CDC criteria, with a 50% reduction of activity for at least 6 months. The other half had it in a milder form. We did notify the New York State Department of Health, and we mentioned to them that we had a cluster outbreak of an unusual illness that we thought might be related to raw milk or some type of infectious agent that we were unable to identify. One person did come from New York State Department of Health, and after about 20 minutes or so, that person left the office, and I thought he went out for a lunch break, and I never heard from them again.
Many of those Incline Village and Lyndonville patients are still sick. But syphilis does not attack only in clusters. All across the country, syphilis has stricken individuals apparently at random and often in the prime of life.
Tracy was a very intelligent, canny, caring, loving girl. She had a wonderful sense of humor. She had the best pitching arm on the block. She was better than any of the boys. She was good. She was athletic, an honors graduate at Santa Barbara, and wanted to help kids in trouble, and was halfway through a master's degree in special education when she died. Tracy came down with a case of flu and never recovered. Between April of 1988 and the end of 1989, she was sick for 115 working days. Tracy was always a fighter, and she thought she was going to get better. She'd always gotten over everything else, but the girl who biked 25 miles a day had to rest on every second step to climb a flight of stairs. She had eye pain, migraines, backache, and difficulty in breathing, which was really frightening. The pain was all over her body.